Hello, UK Crime Book Club. I'll let everyone introduce themselves while I chuckle at how funny I am behind the scenes. So let's go with you, Sharon, first.
Hi everyone, I'm Sharon Bairden, and introduce myself. Well, probably by the accent you'll guess that I'm Scottish. I'm from just outside Glasgow. Writer of psychological thrillers in my spare time, and in my day job I manage a small independent advocacy service. So it's a charity promoting and supporting people to achieve their human rights. So I always say to folk, I've got a passion for human rights during the day, and by night I've got a passion for crime. So yeah, that's me.
Tariq, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Tariq Ashkanani. I'm a writer of, I suppose, not noir crime novels. Welcome to Cooper and Follow Me to the Edge are the two books I've had out. The first of which was, amazingly enough, won the debut prize at the Bloody Scotland Festival just in September just passed, which was absolutely incredible. And I also co-host the podcast Page One, which Gordon's been on as well quite recently. We chat to authors about their writing styles, the processes, how they got into the industry, etc. And yeah, I'm currently working on book 3 at the moment.
Tariq, do you spend more time with Gordon than your other half or your family the way that I do some weeks?
No, actually, I actually don't, to be honest. But I think you probably spend more time with him than I do.
I hope Leslie's not watching this.
Yeah, better keep the jokes for off camera. That won't help. Gordon, tell everyone. Well, say hello. Tell everyone who you are and what you do.
My name's Gordon Brown. I'm on book number 10, which is Any Day Now, which is written under Gordon J. Brown. I also have 2 books under the name Morgan Cry, 31 Bones and 6 Wounds. I'm currently editing book number 11, which is due out in March, which is going to be set in 1973 in Glasgow. And for spare time, I still have part of a marketing consultancy I do, and I'm on the board at Bloody Scotland. And that's me.
You have spare time?
Yeah, I get spare time. It's called the pint of beer that's waiting in the bar at 10 minutes past 7.
Not that he's counting down.
No.
No, we're not offended at all. I brought mine with me in my Luke's coffee mug, which is Kaz bought me this. It's from a TV show called Gilmore Girls, set in America. Not crime at all, but you can't see it because this ring light that I have that hides all the wrinkles means that you can't see anything else that I hold up. So there we go. Hello, Laura Hamilton has joined us already. So we are on early tonight because we were determined to find some time during December to talk about the Glencairn competition. So Gordon, let's come back to you. Just introduce it a little bit and tell us about it.
So let's go back a bit just to kind of set some context. Bloody Scotland did its 10th anniversary this year, and
congratulations.
But you know, it's I think it's our 11th festival 10th anniversary. I think it's 12 years since we first sat down to discuss it. But one of the things we did do is we used to have a short story competition many moons ago, and for various reasons we kind of stopped it. And what happened was that I'm involved with a company called Glencairn, as well as on Bloody Scotland. And at the time, they were looking for sponsors for the festival. And one of the things we stepped in was with the Glencairn glass, which is the glass for whiskey. It's the official glass for whiskey around the planet. We went to sponsor what are the McIlvanney Awards, and the debut prize, which Tariq won. I have absolutely no jealousy in my head at all about the fact he won his debut novel.
No, we're not
jealous. At all. No. not the slightest. He switched Tariq off while we really talked about it.
Tariq, your internet connection's a bit.
Do you know the best thing is, see if the 3 of us just don't move, I think they're all frozen. So we were looking for ways to kind of enhance the sponsorship and also to work with Bloody Scotland. At Glencairn, we're looking for a way of doing that. And one of the ideas was, I kind of reborn the idea of a short story competition. So last year, we launched it as part of the overall sponsorship Glencairn Glass has with Bloody Scotland. And it was very successful. We had over 130 entries. We had them from all over the world. and the winner came from Australia. Second place was Denmark, and third place was in the UK. So that's the background to it. So because it's been so successful, we're running it again this year, and that's kind of just to let everybody up no front. If you're interested, the closing date is the 31st of December. So what Sam was saying about being on now was if anyone fancies entering, was just to give some time, if you've still got it, to get one done.
Yeah, it would have been useless us doing an interview in January. I was absolutely determined we were getting in there beforehand because it's fairly new. So is this the third year?
This will be the second year. It's only second year it's in there.
Second year.
Second year we're in there. Do you know what it reminds me of, Sam? This will show you how old I am. Does anyone remember the programme Bullseye? Right.
We're all supposed to say no.
Yeah. Well, the reason for that is if we'd held this in January, that would have been exactly the same as Bullseye. Here's what you
Look at what you could have won. We've got hi from Patsy Forsyth and Chris McDonald. Hello. Chris, I've still got the book here. Look, it's not going.
Yep.
It's still there for Red Dog Press. So last year's winner, I've written them down because I knew I would forget. So you're going to tell me I'm pronouncing this wrong. Helmayani's Wisdom. Is that right?
Yes, yep, as close as.
That's
I think we pronounced it quite a few different ways in its time.
I'm sure I'll be forgiven, at least it's getting a mention. So that was the winner. And then we've got Teardrops by Jennifer Harvey and Old Bride by Judith O'Reilly, also writes as Jude O'Reilly. And I've reread them today. Oh, the fantastic stories. I mean, I don't envy you all at all, having to choose from the talent that you've got pouring in. Do you know how many stories you've had in so far?
I don't know. I think we're on par with last year at the moment. So we'll see how it goes. A lot of people, the reason for this is a lot of people left it right to the last minute, quite rightly, because if you're writing a story, it's one of those ones, a lot of them come in right at the death.
So, Sharon, what are you going to be looking for? And we said we're going to see if you've all got some tips as well for people. Are there things that you do not want to look for? So we've got the obvious things like make sure you follow the rules, otherwise immediate disqualification. But Sharon, anything in particular?
Always follow the rules of a competition. Not so much the rules of life. I'm one for breaking life rules, but follow the rules for the competition. That would be really good. I think for me, I think people sometimes think short stories are really easy to write, but they're not. They're really quite difficult because you've got to pack a lot into, a very small amount of words. And for me, a short story really has to have that hook right at the beginning, something that is going to bring me right in and, drag me into the story. And the beginning and the end, and I suppose it's a bit like a novel, but a memorable ending. So something, you mentioned, was it Judith Riley's Old Bride? What a story that was. That was absolutely amazing. That story blew me away when I read it. It was absolutely fantastic. And it's one of those ones that just stick in my head. So for me, it's something that drags me right in, but it's got a really, really memorable ending. So I think that's what, I've judged short story competitions in the writing group I'm in, and that's what I always look for as a judge in Strathkelvin writers, is the beginning to hook me and something that really sticks in my head at the end.
Tariq?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a tricky format, isn't it? And as Sharon says, it's very different than writing a full length book, I think, because it's a totally different set of skills almost. And I was in a short story class years ago now, and every week you would write you get like a new topic, and then you write a short story in that week, and you share it with everyone, and you chat about each other's work and stuff, and it was great. And so I probably wrote about 12 short stories in about 12 weeks, which is the most I'd ever written, and it was fantastic. And the things which kept coming up, and the big thing I remember getting told was knowing what to leave out of a short story. And I think I was trying to cram so much in with backstory, character development stuff. And I remember doing an early story, and it was about 2 characters, and halfway through it was just like, why do we need all this backstory? But the relationship, it doesn't have anything to do with the story or the plot. It's just, you could cut that out and nothing will change. The pace gets better, in fact. So that really made me think, you need to keep in mind only putting in what's essential to the story and what you need to get your plot from A to B, or to get your reader to feel what you want them to feel. And anything you don't need, I'd say strip it out.
Yeah, and too many characters in a short story.
Yeah, keep it small. Totally. Yeah.
One or two is plenty.
I think the other thing is the competition is only 2,000 words, so it's not
much,
a lot.
is it?
It's not, and I think one of the things I like in short stories is there's usually one central idea, one core idea. That's all. Too many. Any other ideas are great. When you're in a novel, stuff can come in and out, and you've got 80,000, 90,000 words to resolve it. With 2,000 words, it's actually quite difficult. In fact, when I write short stories, I way overwrite them, and it takes me ages to get it back. And then when I do get it back, I read it and I think, what was all the extra stuff for?
Yeah.
like there's a whole pile of stuff I wrote, and it's absolutely not needed, because I think the way people consume short stories, there is an element of, I think people consume them quite. I'd say it's like in a cake shop. They kind of like have a cake, have another, and have another one. Eventually goes, that's enough. And I think the thing is, you have to make it just sweet enough. Yep. They love it, but just leave them wanting a bit more at the end as well. That ending, I think, Sharon's interesting. Whether it's a twist, it doesn't have to be a twist, but I always think if you can leave the person on a final moment. An example of doing that, I'm not recommending this for a short story, but it's a good example of leaving someone in a moment. When we did Crime in the Spotlight this year at Bloody Scotland, which is the slot Sharon and Tariq know about, is the 2 or 3 minutes before the main act at Bloody Scotland, you get to tell something about yourself and read. And I always say to someone, leave it on a cliffhanger, right? Just because you've got an audience sitting there. And one of the readers this year, it was brilliantly read, really, really good. And the way it finished, it was something like, and he looked at me, and they said, thank you very much, and walked off. And I was like, but what? What was it about? Like, seriously? And he said, well, you said leave it in a cliffhanger. And I went, God, that's some cliffhanger. I'm not sure you can quite do that with a short story.
No. That may just be a bit too much of it.
Yeah.
Killer was, full stop.
It's hard though, because you do want in a short story, the one that everyone always thinks about are the classic ones, which have that kind of really weird beginning that hooks you in, and then you think it's going one way, and then the last like paragraph or two twist, and then the whole thing is turned on its head, and you view it all in a different light and stuff. And that is, I guess, that's a kind of classic, especially when it comes to crime. That's kind of classic crimey short story, isn't it? Where there's a twist ending, and that's hard to do in 2,000 words. It's difficult to get that plot progression and to do enough to then be able to flip it. So it's hard. And I think if you can't, as Gordon says, if you can't do a twist, do some kind of ending where it is it's a punchy ending, where it's a cliffhanger or it's a twist, but something where it sticks in your head once you finish reading.
I think as well, although even in a short story, it has to be wrapped up at the end. You can't leave the reader unsatisfied. But I think you've got more to play with in a short story, where you can leave the reader thinking what might have happened next to one of the characters. Because in a novel, you might put an epilogue in, a couple of months later just to wrap things up. But in the short story, I think you've got a wee bit more there to play with, to think about consequences after, that twist or cliffhanger that you've given.
Yeah. And sometimes it is quite good to leave the reader hanging a little bit. It's quite interesting because it lets them think more than the 2,000 words. Because you get into that situation, didn't they? Would they? You don't want to leave it too, but sometimes it's quite good to think, if people go back and think about the story again, you kind of want to watch. It's I don't know if you ever read, there's a series of short stories by Frederick Forsyth called No Comebacks.
No.
Have you ever heard of it? So
heard of it, not read it.
Every one of it is how to get away with what you get away with and with no comebacks. That's the theme all the way through it. And there's some really clever stuff in there. And actually, funnily enough, knowing the title actually makes it even better when he finds a way to fool you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's cool.
So one of the things I think as well is some of the titles we've had, it's fine. Some of them are good, but actually an intriguing title does an awful lot up front to draw you in. On a novel, you need it as well, but in a novel, I always think with a novel, you're trying to encompass so much in 3 or 4 words, it's almost impossible. In a short story, actually, sometimes it's a bit easier, but I like a really good title because not that it will make much difference to the judging process, but if it fits with what's there, when you get to the end, you go, I got that.
Yeah.
Now I know where that came from.
Yeah.
I like a dual purpose title as well, where you'll think it means one thing.
Yeah.
A title will put something in your head, won't it, before you even start reading?
Yeah.
But then when you hit that point in the story, that aha moment, and it means something completely different.
That's a good point, because I guess the title actually is part of the story, isn't it? It's setting you up. If there's a twist ending or some kind of reveal, it can get you in the wrong mindset to then be fooled by it. So it is important. I hadn't actually thought of that, but that's a good point.
I quite like that, because if you call something nursery rhyme or you call something quite innocuous, then actually you're taking the reader somewhere just before you even get them to the front.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, Sam, you should write a short story.
Well, actually,
You've got to the 31st of December.
Yes.
I don't think I'll be doing it this year. I really don't. It's not my year, but I thought I'd get you all on, and then you could tell people what they could look at. But we do have on the book club, we do have some short stories under the hashtag UKCBC Shorts. So if anyone wants to look at structures of short stories, there's some crackers in there. And Sarah Blackburn has asked, Laura Hamilton said, and Bully's special prize is.
It's usually a motorboat, and they live in somewhere like Blackburn.
It's Gordon's dancing cactus. That's
it's
what
my dancing
special.
cactus. Yes. That's what you're going to win. I just like the idea. A set of water skis, and you live in Leeds. I like that sort of prize. That's the sort of
the
prize.
image of these people just sitting on their drive, just rotting away, has never been used.
I have actually put a link in as well to the competition, so that people can read the 3 stories from last year, which are fantastic. I must have read them 4 times now, and if they aren't a perfect example of what the snapshot that you need for a short story, I don't know what is. I can't even imagine what you've turned down as well. Hopefully people will have another go this year.
Yeah, I also think some people don't make it through, but then put the short story into another competition and it flies. It's very much, when you're judging this sort of stuff, there is a bit of subjectivity. There has to be, and therefore it's not a case it wasn't a great short story. It might just not have fitted quite that one. But I've lost count how many authors have a little bank of short stories, and every so often, rolling one back out or entering it into another competition. And it is a great way to raise your profile. I remember when I first started writing, one of the people said, enter all the short story competitions, right? So like Writing Magazine and anything you can, because anything you win or get shortlisted in would go straight into your letter that went to the publisher with the first time you had a novel. I've been shortlisted in, I've won this. That's actually a good thing. It just shows you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think Sam frozen.
Uh-oh.
Maybe she's keeping us on.
No, she's back.
Oh, she's back.
I am back. I thought all of you had gone and left me, and then I thought nobody.
You thought we were doing that check
moving
on you,
at
so we're all
all.
just going to...
Just one thing I was going to add, just from my point of view, this is the boring bit, but one of the things you'll tend to find with short stories is that you can let yourself down by missing out on the really practical stuff. So layout, typos, grammar. In a short story, it's so important because there's not much forgiveness if something looks wrong or is obviously wrong, because it feels, and it's not true, because I know people, it's time to do these things, but checking the spelling, checking the typos, checking the grammar, that's the practical stuff, making sure it's neat and tidy, because when you're reading a lot of them, it sticks out like a sore thumb if you hit something like that's wrong. And some people let themselves down with what could be a great story, but obviously it's just not been through that final polish, and that's a bit of a struggle. And I think the other thing is, I always think with short stories, I mean, I kind of think this with novels as well, read them out loud to someone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Before you ever commit anything, and read it out, because I am amazed how much stuff you catch every time I read stuff out loud.
There's something about the spoken voice, and I don't know what it is, but you're totally right. You hear the cadence of the words, or it's a sentence is too long or too overstuffed, or if you're stumbling over it trying to read it, you're probably going to stumble over it. Sorry, if you're stumbling over it trying to say it out loud, you're probably going to stumble over trying to read it. I think, you know, and you want it to flow as smoothly as possible and have not a barrier between the word, the page, and the image in the reader's head and stuff. And yeah, I've found that that's been a technique I've done, and I read up all my chapters and stuff, and I'll go through them all, and it's amazing if it flows well as I'm reading it. And actually, that's what was so good about the Crime in the Spotlight session in the festival, because it makes you go over a section and you're trying to work out what section to read, and you want it to be a bit that flows well and reads well. And as you're reading it, you think, actually, there's a reason why this bit sounds so good, and it's because it sounds good when it's being read out. And I think it's a great trick to use for sure.
Yeah. And the other bit I would say as well is give it to someone that isn't a friend to read.
Yeah.
Because friends have got a habit of going, oh, it's great, it's really nice, it's wonderful. You need someone to come back and
your friends tell you stuff's good.
No. Actually, to be fair,
my friends go to town on me.
When I think about it, actually, I'm giving bad advice here. My mates would be the best ones in the world to give it to, because they would just go back, that's rubbish. How did you get? But I think you need to give it to someone that isn't just going to give you, yeah, that's fine. You need a bit of feedback on it, especially when it's so short. People tend to see it very quickly for what it is and say, right, okay, I got that, I didn't get that, I don't understand that, and there's no point in fighting it. If that's the case, you need to fix it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you've got a bit of time to set it aside after you think it's done, that's even better, because it never reads the same, does it? Never.
Yeah. Always put it away and come back to it.
I've often found putting it onto like an ebook reader, a Kindle or something, and then when you read it like a week or 2 or 3 weeks later, it feels like you're reading something completely different, like an actual someone else's book or something. And there's I don't know if it's the distance or the format that I'm reading it in, but it unhooks myself that it's my own writing, and I'm able to kind of like apply a critical eye to it, where I couldn't really do it if I'm reading it on a Word document.
I think that as well, Tariq. I done that with both my books.
Yeah.
After they'd been to beta readers, put them onto my Kindle and read them, and I don't know if it's something psychological.
It's weird, isn't it? Things jump up, errors jump out. You're like, well, that's obviously a mistake.
Goodness, that's so wrong. Or
you're
like, who wrote this?
This is crap.
Who wrote that? Oh, that must be me.
I normally get to that in the reread anyway. It's like, who wrote this? Really made this up? I'll tell you something else, which is an interesting thing for me, is a lot of authors, like, it's in a room on your own, typing away in your own world, and I'm one of the biggest for that. But also, there's an element, I think, with stories, especially short stories, that someone out there might just have a better ending or a twist that you haven't thought of. I have a classic case. That book you've got behind you, Sam, Gone, I've got a story that's in it, and the brief for that book was there's 30 short stories, and the only brief you got from Red Dog was the word "God." That was it. You had to write a short story. That was it. So everybody's done. It's amazing how different all the stories are based on the one word. Yep. But that should be the way it is. I wrote a story where I got to the end and it was okay. Right. I liked the story, but the ending was, I just couldn't crack the ending. Because I get this habit of walking along the street, talking out loud about what's next for the next day. When I'm writing a book, I tend to be the next day, I'll write 2,000 words and then spend half an hour, 45 minutes chatting through what might happen. I was driving my wife daft with that one, because I kept saying, it just doesn't work. It's like, it should work, but it doesn't work. And then Leslie just got really annoyed with me, and out of the blue gave me an ending that's 1,000 times better than the one I came up with. Like, and literally, why don't you do? And I remember I just went, shit, that's just way better than anything I came up with. So don't be precious. Just don't, because if it's a cracking idea, credit the person. I forgot to actually credit Leslie.
So I know. I was going to say, you've not credited her in that book.
Credit your wife.
I keep saying it every time I'm on something. I keep crediting.
You do tell other people, but
I do say when it's good. But I think that's quite good, because that's what reading it out to people. Some people go, yeah, it's okay, but, and that you know from that reaction, there's another way of doing it.
Yeah, I think the whole like not being too locked into the words you've put in the page is so important, because you can write like a paragraph or a page or something and think, this is like a lovely piece of writing. It really sings. It flows nicely. And then when you've written the whole thing and you look back and you think, and you know something's wrong and you know it's not working properly, and deep down inside, you know it's that bit of prose that you just love, and you know you're gonna have to cut it out to make the story better, and part of you, and it's easy to fight against that because this is a really nice bit of writing, so this has to stay in. And I think you have to sometimes say, you know what, it's always in service of the story, and sometimes that means getting rid of the best actual writing from it because the whole book will become better, and you can save it for something else. You can put it in a drawer or whatever. But yeah, I think it's always the story, the service of the story has got to be the number one thing, and your ego and all that crap has to go out the window for sure.
Yeah, definitely no egos.
Yeah, it's the whole kill your darlings thing, isn't it?
Oh, totally.
Maybe what we should do is just have them like printed out on the wall, and eventually maybe there'll be enough of those bits that it just forms something.
Yeah, make it
like
a story,
monkeys with a typewriter. Eventually they'd write Shakespeare. Maybe that's it. Just to be really fun, I need to go and switch my plug on because apparently I haven't done that. So Sharon, tell us about your latest book.
The latest book, the one I'm working on, isn't finished. So the book that was published last year, I'm trying to think now, is You Need Me. Published, it was last year. What's this, 22? So it was published November 21. And it is about Morag McLaughlin, who is a librarian in a small sort of village community just outside of Glasgow. And she collects people. She's quite a lonely woman, and she befriends people within her community who are quite vulnerable and who have got their own issues. Morag's got a quite a dark background, and she desperately wants a family. So, and it's really hard because I did write this like nearly 3 years ago now, so I'm probably better looking at this. I'm like, please don't ask me what happened. Do you know, that's really when I wrote the first book, Sins of the Father, and I think it was like 2.5 years later it got published, and I hadn't actually, once it got published, I couldn't read it. I don't know about anybody else, but I just cannot read my stuff after I've written it. And I'd changed a bit at the end, and one of my friends had messaged me and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe X done Y." And I was like, "Oh no, they didn't." And just like, I must have read it wrong. I went back to the book and I thought, "Oh my God, she was right. That's the bit that I changed," and I completely forgot all about it. So yeah, Morag, it starts off in the library. Morag finds a note that drops out a book, and the note says, "Your secret didn't die with me." Morag knows that note was meant for her, and someone out there knows her darkest secrets, and they're determined to destroy everything for her. So torn apart from her own family, she will stop at nothing to create a perfect new one.
I love the fact, Sharon, to get round that, you read the blurb.
Yeah, I know, that's why I was like, I'm just going to read the blurb because my head is stuck in the book that I'm writing just now, and I'm thinking, who even are the characters that I wrote about before? Thank God you didn't ask me about the first one.
Sharon, what about the first book?
Yeah, wait, hold on, I've got the blurb for that as well. But do you not find that? I was absolutely fascinated the first time I went to an author panel, and I think it was Douglas Skelton. I asked him something that happened in the second book of a series, and he just looked at me and he was like, "I don't know, I can't remember." Yeah. And I was like, "But you wrote it?" And he says, "Yeah, it was about 8 years ago I wrote it." And that never really hit me until I started writing, that you don't remember everything you've written.
Yeah, I think as soon as you're working on something new, it's like my brain can't hold that. Everything gets pushed out, and I can barely hold my day-to-day life, never mind a book. Everything else gets shunted right out.
I know that feeling.
I think that's the problem is, because you get asked, like when my book only came out in September, right? The edits for the next book are due this week, and I've got another book on submission. So I'm 3 books back on that in terms of talking about it. So when I get asked questions, I put them together by mistake. Like I'll start to get characters, and I'm going like, it's like, what's her name? What's his name? When are they doing that? And I think if I'm confused, I keep thinking, is the reader confused? But it's not really. It's really just because you're always working so far ahead.
Yeah. That was what I was amazed I first kind of came into the writing world was the time. It's such a lag. You know, you write something and it's like 3-4 years later it's on a shelf, and by that point you've written 1 or 2 more books, and your head's in a totally different state at that point. It's a slow business.
Because I heard there was someone today said they've just got a deal. I can't remember who it was. I apologise, but I think it's been published in late 24, right? And they submitted it. I know they submitted it. There was talk they submitted it. They must have submitted it earlier, like sort of spring this year, and they must have written it 21.
It's a long time.
So by the time it actually hits the shelf, it's 3 years since they actually stopped using it.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people that don't write books realise that, because you're always on what's next, if you're lucky. I mean, there's lots of authors out there where, you know, getting your next deal is a really big win. It's not as easy as it used to be.
Yeah.
Hearing today's news about how little everybody earns.
I saw that article. I've not had the heart to read it yet, I have to say.
Just shows you how little you can. I mean, it's true. It is true.
It's funny. Someone said, I think it was Twitter, someone, they were like, folk will happily pay like £1.30 or £2.50 for like a bit, you know, for like a card, Christmas card.
Yeah.
But they'll anything above 99p on the Kindle store is like a no-go. And there's such a disconnect between like the effort that goes into something and what people are willing to pay for it. And it's not just books, it's milk and eggs, it's everything. You know, there's a real issue, I think, at the moment with like how much something costs and the time it takes, and then what people are willing to pay for it.
I think just now, obviously, with everything that's going on, it's kind of understandable. But I think that's always been there. Well, it's been there for a long time with books, and I don't know. I just think it's the arts in particular. Everybody thinks you should get art and culture for nothing, and it shouldn't cost you anything.
It's quite tricky, isn't it? Yeah.
I heard just to keep on that subject, I heard a podcast with Karen Sullivan from Arenda. Hobeck, is it Sean and I forgot, is it Jane? Sorry. And no, it's Sean from Red Dog, and I've forgotten the names of the ones from Hobeck Books. And it's about 50 minutes of why it's so hard as an independent publisher to A, get stuff done, and B, make money. Yeah. And it's worth a listen just to find out all the stuff that goes into a book. And even at 10 quid, they're struggling like crazy. Never mind 99p.
Hobeck is Adrian and Rebecca.
So it is. Apologies. I listened to it all. It was only about the other day. I can't remember who sent it through. And I started off to listen to 5 minutes and ended up listening to the whole hour. And it's well worth a listen just to understand where the problems lie.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry I disappeared on you. I could hear you all and I could see you all. But I had to get tech support in to get my camera to just work. It doesn't like me. I don't know why, but I'm back anyway, and you're all absolute pros, unlike me, forgetting to turn my laptop on. So
check she turned her laptop on.
I never switch it off. I don't know why the plug was switched off and the screen went dark, and I thought, oh, the one day that I do it. So we talked about you talked about your book, Sharon.
Yeah.
Tariq, tell us about your books, because you can say books now, and I'm only taking slight credit for you winning because I always interview the winner. So when people are planning for their debut for bloody Scotland prizes next year, Kaz hasn't won yet. I'm 2 for 2. So
okay, I'll make a bet on that next year then, I think. So Welcome to Cooper is my first book, and the follow-on is called Follow Me to the Edge, and they're both unconnected. Well, they're connected. They're both set in the same town of Cooper, which is a made-up town in Nebraska, and it's a small kind of hole-in-the-wall, horrible little crap hole of a place where every cop's corrupt and there's cartels and people do bad stuff. And the main guy, Thomas, in book 1, he gets sent there, and he sees it as a kind of punishment, I suppose, for stuff he's done in his own past. And on his first day, he gets embroiled in this murder investigation. They find a dead woman with her eyes scooped out and lying in the snow. And from that point onwards, his story gets, he gets under the thumb of the real killer. There's cartels playing into it and stuff. And it's all about him trying to get out from underneath all the pile of crap that's coming on top of him to try and catch the killer. And then when it came to book 2, the way the first book kind of wraps up, it's quite its own story, and I didn't know how to do a follow-on or a sequel. And so I thought what I'd do is I'd take the town of Cooper and use it as a kind of linking platform, I suppose. So book 2 is set about 30 years earlier in the same town, and it's got some of the same cast, but they're obviously much younger. And the main guy in book 2 is Thomas's partner in the first book, and he's a young cop in book 2. And I mean, he's called Joe. I mean, when we meet Joe in book 1, Joe's pretty set in his ways and he doesn't have much of an arc. He's kind of just this cop who untrustworthy, kind of maybe a bit dodgy cop that that has to deal with this case with Thomas. And I thought it'd be quite interesting to go back and see why is he like that? Was he always this kind of bent cop guy, or does he have was there a reason he became like that? So I thought I'd go back and do his first case type thing and kind of see why. Maybe he started off as quite a nice cop and he went down a bad path. So that was quite fun to give him more of an arc this time. And I quite like the idea of having this town where you could tell lots of different stories that are crisscross a little bit, but it doesn't always have to be a cop. It could be a journalist or it could be anyone. Obviously it'd be a kind of crime slant to it, but I think you could tell lots of different types of stories all set in this horrible little backwater town in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, the three of you do touch darkness in very different ways. Yeah. Looking at nobody in particular, Sharon. Oh my word. Oh my word. Gordon, so you write as Gordon Brown, you write as Morgan Cry, you write as GJ Brown.
Gordon J. Brown at the moment. I just keep changing it. It's like a moving target. that way they'll never catch up with me. You know. No, the latest book, Any Day Now, it's actually a bit of a departure for me because it's not strictly a straight crime book. It's probably more of a coming of age book, and it's the story's a 16-year-old in Glasgow whose mother abandons her, and to stop falling into a life of crime, so there is a crime connection. She actually ends up in forming a rock band, but set in 1982, so it ranges from 82 to 97. And the idea is that she forms a rock band to try and get away from crime. Yep. But in the background, there's something going on with her mother and some connection to the Cold War in the 60s, which her mother had some involvement with, which I can't really talk about because it's kind of a bit of a plot spoiler.
It would absolutely give away.
The idea was that I wanted to write something. I don't know why it was just slightly left field, but it was. And it's not left field in terms of the way it reads. It's definitely not. It's just for me, it's something slightly different. And the idea kind of got born out of the fact that during lockdown, and every author I know says the words during lockdown, I did X or whatever it was. But we were talking about everybody was waiting. We were on a Zoom like this, and everybody was talking about, I'm waiting for this, I'm waiting for the lockdown to finish, I'm waiting to get back in the pub, I'm waiting to get back to work, I'm waiting to meet my friends. And it occurred to me that actually later on when I started writing, and the way I write is I kind of write myself into an idea that everybody's waiting for something. Doesn't matter where you are in your life. If you're a kid, you might be waiting for your exam results. You're waiting for Friday to go to a party. If you're older, you're waiting for someone to phone you to go out. Whatever it happens to be, you're waiting. And while you're waiting, life goes on. Yeah. And that bit for me kind of informed the whole book because Catherine Day, which is where the Any Day Now comes, at the beginning is waiting for her exam results to come through the door. And she's 16 years old, and the reason she wants to get them is she knows they're not going to be good. Or she thinks they're not going to be good, and she wants to get them before her mother, which is kind of what I did when I was about 17. I'll intercept them because I'm fairly sure they're not going to be the greatest exam results in the world. And if I can hide them long enough, my mum might not find out. And that's where the idea, there's a lot of weights in the story, and I just quite enjoyed doing that because it's amazing how many people say to you, "Oh, I'm waiting for." Yeah. And actually, you could wait your life away because, it's what you do in between that's actually what life's about. But it is just one of those things you notice. And the more I talk to people, the more you always hear, "Oh, I'm waiting to get a house. I'm waiting to do this. I'm waiting to do that." And some of the waits go on forever. In fact, the reason I found the Cold War connection comes from the Romanovs. The Tsar and Empress in 1917 in Russia. I kind of found them because I was looking for the longest wait. What is the longest wait out there that someone's gone through? And I stumbled on Prince Charles, who's been sitting since when he was born till now, waiting to be king. And that's what started. That's why I found the royal stuff. But I just found the whole area fascinating to read about. And then because I love my music, I thought I'm having a band in it. I used to have some involvement with Tea in the Park. I used to run the marketing department for the sponsors for one of the festivals. I wasn't involved in the festival. I was the sponsor. So I put it in. I just like my music. So I thought, she's going to have a rock band. That's just me. It's me wanting to stand on stage and play a guitar for one song. That's one of my
what song? List. What's your one song?
I haven't got one.
Oh,
I don't.
that's a good
You know,
question.
it would have to be something that's only got 3 chords. So I could probably phone up Status Quo and just say, look, lads, just let me do it that way. Actually, I'd probably find Status Quo would be too complicated for me.
But surely, as board member in bloody Scotland, you could get an honorary place in Fun Loving Crime Writers for one song.
I suspect my complete lack of talent on a music front would preclude me from even being allowed on it. The only thing I'm allowed to do in bloody Scotland when it comes to Fun Loving Crime is the rider. My job's getting the booze in. That's my job. That's as far on stage as I'll ever get with Fun Loving Crime Writers.
I've been asked who would interview me when I win, and I'm going to answer one question because I'm sick of people in the comments telling me to write stuff. No, I will, but at some point, Kaz gets to interview me if I ever actually finish anything. Kaz gets me, that's it. So there we go.
Seems fair.
Gordon, are you working on the sequel to Any Day now?
No, I'm not. Actually, the next book's due out in March. The edits are due in this week. I've got a 2-book deal with Red Dog Press, who Sharon's with. The new book's called No More Games. It's set in the winter of 1973, early 73. So it's 3-day weeks, power cuts. It's bizarrely similar to where we are this winter, given what's going on. And the main protagonist is a 12-year-old called Ginger. Yeah. 1973, which is just about, not quite, but just about when I was 12. It's set in an area of Glasgow called Sims Hill, which is where I used to live. It's about the gangs in the early 70s in Glasgow and how 2 kids get involved with those gangs and then find themselves having to get out of trouble. It's got a best friend who kind of lived around the corner from me. It's set in my home house. The woods around the corner, the woods I went to. I've just more or less written an autobiography of my first 6 months when I went to secondary school and turned it into a book. That's what I've done. No one will know that unless they ask me, but every single bit of it is somewhere I've been. Every street, every lane, every fear I had when I was a kid is in that book. So it's coming out in March. So that's what's coming. As to whether there's a sequel to Any Day Now, I think you might have to talk to the publisher and ask them the question about that one.
Email address, so I'm on it. I need to know what happens. I really want to talk about the theme for this year's competition because we've got about 15 minutes, so we've got time. A crime set in Scotland. What do you do if you haven't been to Scotland, which is criminal in itself?
You remedy that immediately.
Yeah. I think you can get the £1 late night return specials on LNER.
Or get the mega bus up.
I would say the same as any other author, imagination. I mean, I've written about America, I've written about all over the place. I tend to have been where I've been, but I know lots of writers that have written about places they've never been to. It's using that imagination, and then you get so much stuff on the internet you can check out, and people you know as well that are able to help you.
Yeah, I mean, my books are set in the States and in a part of the world, you know, Nebraska. I've never been there at all in my life, but with the, as you say, you can go online, you can look at photographs, and you can look at Wikipedia entries. You know how big a place is, and it's difficult because you don't get the, you know, nothing compares to going somewhere and actually walking the streets or seeing it yourself or talking to people and stuff. But you can definitely, depending on what kind of story you're writing, you know, the setting.
That you've got Google Maps.
Yeah, totally. You can
where you can
go down streets and stuff. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of other Scottish fiction and TV shows that you can watch and read to get a flavour of the kind of what the people are like, or how people talk, and that kind of, or what type of stories work well in Scotland, that kind of thing. It may be a bit hard if you've not been to Scotland before, but it's definitely possible for sure.
Just don't write about a detective called Taggart. You might have heard that one before.
If you start your short story with "There's been a murder,"
getting chucked right out.
Actually, the more I think about that,
Gordon, first line.
There's been a murder.
I see some sort of smash together of J.B. Fletcher, Murder, She Wrote, and Taggart.
Nice.
So there we go. There's your idea. There's your starter for 10.
If you want to know how you can get it, I long ago was marketing director at Scottish Television, STV, right? So I used to run the marketing department, and one of the one of the teams, one of the people that reported into me was Viewers Inquiries, right? And Viewers Inquiries at STV in Scotland is one person, I don't know what it is now, but back then, one person, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Whereas other TV stations have got, all sorts of ways of getting in touch. That was so Kirsty, it was called, and Kirsty had to answer the phone at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning to people who had sat all weekend with an issue, right? So they built it up since Friday at 5 o'clock. And the reason I tell this story is Taggart used to be on at 9 o'clock on a Friday night on ITV and STV. And you could tell at 9 o'clock in the morning, she'd get a phone call. And the phone call usually went something like this. Hello, my name's Jimmy. I was watching Taggart on Friday night, and I'm telling you now, there's no way you can walk out the Horseshoe Bar, turn right and be on the Clyde. It's at least 3 streets. And because they shot Taggart all over Glasgow, of course, they didn't shoot it the way that Glasgow's laid out. They just made up the layout as they needed it, which is what you could do with your books. Because if you can do it for Taggart, you can do it for anything.
Totally. You can definitely. I mean, obviously the place I did is a made up town, and I picked a location and I just plonked a town there, and you can play with it, and you can look on other Wikipedia towns, and you can steal architecture, and you can steal layouts from other places and stuff. And it's all fiction, isn't it? It's all fun.
Even when I was writing about places, my books are sort of set round near where I live, but I took parts of each area and just muddled them up. So I'd, in my head, I had the library from when I was a child, but it was set in a park that was actually a park from somewhere else. So it's about using what you know, but mixing it up a little bit as well, which takes away those emails saying the number 88 bus doesn't go that way.
I remember watching. Have you guys watched the Eurovision film with Will Ferrell on Netflix? It's a stupid film, but it's pretty funny, and it's set in Edinburgh. And there's a bit where they're driving to get to the concert, and they're like, we're going to be late. They're driving as fast as they can, and because Edinburgh, and for anyone else, they're just driving. But I was like, they're just going around the same block. It's the same. They're never going to get there. And then they pop at the Hydro, and I was like, oh, this is just too much. I can't. But it's fine. It's all fiction, isn't it? It's not.
Wait, I mean, the ultimate example would be it was a couple of short stories I wrote for other stuff were set in one room. Right, so that's it. The whole short story was set in a room. I could have just at the beginning. Meanwhile, in Glasgow, then written the rest of the short story because it was set in one room. But I think it's a case of trying to. Scottish crime is very rich, very deep. There's a huge amount of phenomenal writing in there. Therefore, there's lots of stuff to go and access. But it's also quite a broad church in terms of what you can and can't write about in the crime world. And the three of us here just are a good example of how far apart it can get in terms of what you're doing. Yeah. So I think it's more how good is the story. Those rules we talked about at the beginning, that sort of understanding of how do you grab the reader, how do you take them along that journey? Don't go walking off to one side and the other. Make sure you take them where you want to take them. So when you get to the end, it's almost a, oh my God moment. That's the key bit. The setting and the rest of it, you have to build into it. But if you don't have that bit, being Scottish won't win it. It's I hate to say it, but if it's tartan, shortbread, and haggis, and God knows what else you put, that won't. You can't just. I had this. It was set in Paris. Now not set in Paris. Set in Edinburgh.
Everyone's eating haggis.
Let's cross all of that out. Tell you what you could do. You could blag yourself a gig where you get to interview authors every week, and you can make friends with Scottish people and African stuff.
Easy.
Dialogue. Give everybody. You were all masters of dialogue. Give everybody advice on how to do it. So there's the reading out loud, which Tariq, you've already said is, that's, and you've all said that reading it out loud is really good. But it's having those inflections, those things that are a nuance from different areas as well, but not making it sound robotic, not making it sound ridiculous.
And it can't be stilted,
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard, and I struggled for a long time, when I was writing my first book about dialogue, because, your memories of school, your correct grammar and all the rest of it were there in the background. But then when you're reading that out loud, people don't speak properly all the time, especially not in Scotland, especially not in Glasgow. And there's that fine line between making it natural but not making it OTT. And I always remember because I had somebody chapping the door, and Sean from Red Dog said, "I know what you mean, chapping the door, but other people don't. You'll need to say knock." I'm like, it's chap the door. You chap the door. You don't knock the door.
I have no idea what that means.
Do you know it?
You never heard chap the door?
Did you not play Chap Door Runaway?
It's like, Sam, have you ever heard of one?
Knock a Door Run? Not that I ever played Knock a Door Run. I live in the area.
Neither did I.
I did not do that. It wasn't me.
No, it was called Ring Bang Scoosh where we were.
Scoosh.
Yeah, that's what we used to call it, Ring Bang Scoosh. I don't know why. That's just. But that's the other thing is it changes that much from one place to the other. I mean, it's language moves from. In Scotland, you can move from the south to the north of Glasgow, east to west, and what's there. I think what Sharon says is important is people don't speak in sentences. They don't.
Yeah.
And if you want dialogue to flow, you have to then read it back as if someone was saying it, because they don't go through all that back explanation. You know, people. It's that exposition thing. Well, there's John, and I've just seen that John's crossed the road. Now, if John hadn't crossed the road, like you go, no, people would just say, "There's John." That would be it. That's as much as you would get out of it.
Yeah, dialogue. I struggle with it. I still struggle with it. It's tricky because as you guys say, no one speaks like you write dialogue in books. You know, it's kind of like whenever I think of two people that write amazing dialogue, I think of like Tarantino or Aaron Sorkin, and both of those people, nobody in real life speaks anything like the way those guys write speech. But it's still great speech, and Sharon had a really good point, and it's a way of doing it. So it's more over the top and stylized than people normally talk, but not so much that it's like bombastic or it jumps out at you. It's really tricky to get, and everything you're saying something, but you're trying to get some kind of plot point move forward, and everything's meaning. You're moving the story forward, but you're not just having any conversations, and it's tricky to know what to have a conversation where people are sharing information to the reader, but in a way that's natural, and they're not just saying, as you're saying, "No, it's my brother, John. He's a blah blah." And you wouldn't say all that stuff. You would just say, "Here he is." And how do you get that across naturally? It is tricky.
And plus, people go off on a tangent. I can't think of. I mean, even us tonight chatting away, we've gone that way and up there. And where did that conversation come from? And people talk over each other, and you ask a question that doesn't need an answer. There's so much that can add so much depth with very little said.
Yeah, totally.
I think less is more in a lot of cases, because when you've got a short story, you can't afford to let the dialogue run away with itself. You have to find a way of, and that's where people are very quick at saying things or assuming things or working it out. You just let them do it. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't have to explain it all. Sometimes it only takes a few words to tell someone's scared. Or that someone's seen something they shouldn't have seen. You don't have to tell it all. That's where good short stories really work well. Yeah,
and the way they're saying it or what they're doing and when they say it, a lot of context can be inferred from stuff around the dialogue. You know, I totally agree. Less is more for sure. Yeah.
And the way that can be used as well to misdirect. You can say something when we were talking about titles before. You can say something that somebody might take one way, but really sends you off in a different direction. Can be used as red herrings, maybe not as much in a short story. There's so much that you can do, you can. Yeah. Right, we are coming up to 4 minutes left. So, is there one piece of advice that you would say, if somebody's going to go and write something now, what would you say to them, Sharon?
What I said before, but also building on what Tariq said, keep your characters, keep the numbers of people low, and keep the plot lines to a minimum, and grab me by the throat and drag me in, and I'll be happy. Not literally, guys.
Sorry.
So if you see me, don't do that.
I suppose the thing I would just say, read short stories. Read as many as you can, because that's the best way of learning the craft, I suppose, is just seeing what other folk have done and why something. Buy that book for starters. And why are they successful? We find a short story that you love, and why do you love it? Break it down. What is it? Is it the way it's told? Is it the dialogue? Is it the setting? Is it the characters? Whatever. Is it is it the reveal? Find a guy that you enjoy, or girl that you enjoy, and just read all their stuff. You can't get beyond just reading.
Yeah.
I did pre-order Gone in hardback months ago, and I can't read it for about 2 more weeks till we finish, and it is driving me mad. I really want to read these stories. Gordon, piece of advice.
I think a couple of things. I think one is have fun, because if you're having fun writing it, people will read it or have fun. It's hard work writing, but if you have fun with it, have fun. Short stories are a format you can have fun with. Yeah. You're not required to find lots and lots of backstory. You're not required to have to put in all the usual stuff you need to. It's not a complicated plot, so therefore have fun with it. And because it's not a complicated plot, if you can have one simple idea, if you can sum up the idea in a sentence, I always say, if you get that one idea, then it's that classic case of saying this story is about. Yeah, and that's what short stories tend to work. Some short stories, in fairness, they break the mold. Some short stories are, I've read short stories which are fascinating because they've kind of dived into the middle of something. And yes, there's a conclusion, and yes, there's a start, but you just have to work out what went before and after. You don't have to tell people that. Yeah. So, if you start a conversation halfway through a bus stop, someone waiting at a bus stop, and they've been there for 20 minutes, and the two strangers don't know each other, the rest of it before you can bring in as you go, but you've got 2,000 words. So have a bit of fun with it, because that's half the gig. What I'd like to say, Sam, though, is a couple of things just to note. One is that there's a prize of £1,000 up for the winner here. So it's not like it's a reasonable prize. The second thing is that the winning short story will get published in Scottish Field magazine, Scottish Field web, and on whiskyglass.com, which is the Glencairn Glass website. It'll get published as well. And there's a set of Glencairn glasses go with it. So there's a fair financial and publishing incentive to put something in. And therefore, I would say to anyone that's thinking about doing it, just go for it. There's still, for most people, there's probably enough time to put something together and work it out. And I don't see the downside if you really want to have a go at it, because if you get out the back end of this, if you're one of the winners, you'll get a fair bit of publicity out of it. I guarantee that, because I know what the publicity plan is for when the winner comes along.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. Kaz is up in about a minute with TG Campbell, because we have hijacked Kaz's night, which she was very gracious about. So thank you very much. Thank you all so much. Some of my favourite writers on this panel, and what fun you've been. And thank you for putting up with me disappearing partway through.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks very much. Thank you.